What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another review on this channel. Today we're going to be covering Star Wars Outlaws. I played it on the Xbox Series X. I'm going to preface that at the beginning. And I'm also just going to, right out the gate, say what my rating is, and I'm going to give this game a 6.5 out of 10. So that way, if people just want to know what my score is, you get it at the beginning. You don't have to watch this whole video. If you're curious why I put it at that level, then enjoy the rest of the review as we dive deeper into my reasonings behind it. So first off, what is Star Wars Outlaws? What is this game about? It's basically an open world action adventure game. This is what Ubisoft claims it to be. It's set between the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi series. So if you're familiar with Star Wars, you'll know what era that kind of takes place in. It's the original trilogy, and without going too much into it, there's a lot of the heavy hitters, obviously all the big characters that everyone knows and loves are within this time period. So I'm not going to spoil anything story related, because if you're going to play it, I'm going to save those experiences for you to enjoy through actually playing it. But we play as a character named Kate Vess, and we're essentially navigating the criminal underworld within Star Wars. So, moving on to the story and the setting of it, the story focuses on Kay Vess as well and her companion, which is like a four-legged creature. It's kind of like a mix between a dog and a lizard, I guess, type of thing. But basically, they're working together, and Nyx, which is the name of your pet, can help you do different things like evade enemies, distract enemies, and essentially help you throughout the levels to unlock doors and whatnot. The game also involves four syndicate factions: a Shanga clan, if I'm saying that correctly, um, the Hutts, the Crimson Dawn, and lastly the Pike Syndicate. So I believe those are all four. I think I messed up the name on the first one that I mentioned. But those essentially are the four syndicate factions, and throughout the story and throughout the side missions, it's going to be affecting your relationship with them. And this can essentially make you a target for them, or you're going to be on their good side and they'll let you into certain closed off areas that you would otherwise not be allowed in. And that happens throughout the story, and you kind of have to pick sides. Now, when it comes to actually whether your choice matters, I found it doesn't really matter. You kind of can go with whoever you want to go with, whoever you like. And what I ended up doing was just favoring certain groups, getting the reward at the end, and then pretty much switching to the other groups, getting the reward at the end. You know, pretty much trying to make everyone happy, but I was just trying to unlock the rewards as well. So I don't really feel like the factions had as much weight as they were intending to have, and ultimately that kind of fell short too when it came to that aspect. Now, moving on to the gameplay and how it plays, it's it's definitely an action game, but there is an overwhelming amount of stealth in this game. And when I say that, I mean it is like Splinter Cell, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell level stealth in a Star Wars game about a smuggler who should be shooting enemies. Like, I don't know, I just feel like that aspect of the game and the gameplay loop fell so short, because majority of the time you're just doing these stealth missions, and a lot of them are a you can't get caught or fail type of mission, and then you have to restart. So it becomes very tedious. Although I will say, through my playthrough, if you guys end up checking it out, I didn't really have too many issues. There's only a few times where I actually got caught and had to restart, but most of the time I was able to do the stealth missions pretty easily. So I would say the stealth's not hard, but I'd rather it not only be stealth, if that makes sense. So for me, that was kind of a huge takeaway from the game experience as a whole, because it just felt boring and repetitive, and it didn't have anything changing throughout the whole. I believe I finished at like 16 hours or somewhere like that. I'm not even certain how long I played the game because the story was in incredibly short, and obviously I spent more time just throughout the open world searching for stuff as I normally do in these open world type of games. I will say for the shooting does feel good, so that's good on their part. The shooting does feel good, and that I didn't like when it comes to like the gameplay mechanics, like the traversing the planets. Yes, you're on a speeder, but to be honest, I found it to be very janky, and it was apparent in my playthrough as well. Like I fell off the speeder numerous amounts of times to the point where it just became frustrating when I'm trying to get away from enemies and I just keep running into these stupid little rocks and it sends my character flying forward. Like I'm on a speeder, so I'm levitating off the ground already. I'm hovering off the ground already. I don't understand why this small little rock is causing me so much mischief. Like it just doesn't make any sense, and then it takes you out of the whole experience, right? So things like that I had problems with. I will say, going to more gameplay aspects, the space fight, like space battles and that type of stuff, actually was really good, really well done. I enjoyed that. I don't have too many gripes about that because I actually think they did that pretty good. It didn't feel tacked on. It actually felt developed and sound. Was it over the top amazing? No, but it's definitely a part of the game that I enjoyed, and it added some variety, and I appreciate that. Moving on to graphics. The graphics were okay. I played on the Xbox Series X, as I said. I wouldn't say they were over the top, like the best graphics I've ever seen, but they're also not the worst graphics I've ever seen. As far as interior design of some of these levels, it's definitely Star Wars vibes. They did a good job capturing that kind of essence and the vibe of the Star Wars world, whether it's the character models or just the environment as a whole. When you're walking through like a cantina, or when you're walking through one of the Imperial spaceships, just the interior of it makes you feel like you're watching the movie, but now you're playing within that same field. So they did capture that, and I'm going to give them credit where credit is due for that. The other thing I want to give them credit on is the sound design. The sound design is really good. The soundtrack and the music scores in this game, if you're a fan of Star Wars, you're gonna love it. It's 100% Star Wars, and it has that classic old school trilogy feel to it because it takes place during that. So it gives off like the classic vibe, and I'm a fan of those classic movies. So if you are as well, you'll appreciate it for that. But where it falls flat is for me in the voice acting and the narrative of this story, right? Like you're supposed to be this smuggler, and yes, she doesn't really know how to do these things, so she's learning. But a lot of like the written elements and the actual narration of this character's lines just seem very just emotionless and not like there wasn't a lot of effort put into it. So a lot of it's not believable. It doesn't make me believe the characters, whether in duress or upset or happy. I don't get any of those emotions. It feels very flat and very just surface level, just someone just reading lines, you know? And that to me, as someone who enjoys playing a game for the story, that really disappointed me, and I'm sure it's going to disappoint a lot of other video game fans as well. That it could have been so much better in how they made a gripping story. And that's not to say some of the elements of the story weren't interesting and that there weren't twists. I'm not going to say there weren't. I'm also not going to spoil what those are for the people that actually want to play it. But overall, how the story was told and the voice acting, I guess I would say, specifically the voice acting of the main character, just felt very dry and to me just wasn't very good. Now, let's move on to the open world aspects and the exploration aspects. There are four planets, I believe, two of which are pretty much open world where you can actually go everywhere. Two of which I believe are not. I know for a fact, if my memory serves me well, Kajimi, which is the snow planet, it's open world, and I use quotes, but it's not. It's really like you're in town, and it's just an open town exploration. You can't actually go on the outskirts. I think one of the other planets is called Toshara. That one's open world. Like you can actually explore everything. Tatooine is obviously open world. You can explore everything. And then there's one more that is just slipping my mind, but I don't think you can explore on that one either. So there's two that you can explore vastly, and there's two you can't, which is fine. And I understand what they're doing there, but to also call it an open world game, again, as someone who's played Skyrim, Witcher, all these other open world games that actually are open world and have endless quests and all these things to do, like, I just don't feel it should be called an open world game. But yet it had those aspects, so I can't take it away either. I just don't feel like it was very fleshed out when it came to the open world aspect. I will say there was a good amount of side quests, and if you are going to play this game, I will say that you should focus on the side quests. Don't skip them, because believe it or not, the majority of cool missions, at least in my opinion, were from the side missions and not from the main missions. And again, story design, I just don't know what they were thinking, where this fell flat. Like the point where your side missions are better than your main missions, to the point where I don't want to play your main mission and I just would rather play another fun side mission. That's that's pretty sad and upsetting for just the narrative of the story itself, and for someone to believe the narrative and to follow it and want to follow the story. When your side missions are better, it takes away from the story, because I'm like, well, the side missions seem like they have more attention to detail, more lore behind it, more, it's just, again, more fleshed out, right? And I don't understand why the main story wasn't fleshed out more, if that makes sense. And as far as exploration goes, there are things to be found, things that you can miss if you don't do it, if you don't talk to all the experts. There are things you totally can miss. Characters you're definitely going to miss that you want to see if you're a fan of the Star Wars series. And yeah, overall, explore the world. I would say that's the best thing you can do when playing this game. If you're going to play this game, don't just focus on the main story, because you will 100% be disappointed. Moving on to the performance of it and how it performed, I had a few minor bugs and glitches. I had at one point where the game actually froze and crashed, and then it was a game-breaking bug where it kept crashing during this cutscene. But luckily, I was able to skip the cutscene and it make it work. But if it was loading that cutscene, it kept crashing, and I think this happened to me like 3 times, and I have it recorded. So excuse me, that's pretty upsetting. And I know people, because there was a news article about it where people's save files were being corrupted, and that is a huge issue with Ubisoft. You can't let that happen. People are paying money to have early access. 10, 15 hours in, you can't just be saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, start a new playthrough." Like, that's not how it works. You need to figure out how to fix these patches without corrupting my save files. That's your guys' job. Don't corrupt my save files. Hopefully, if that happened to you and you're watching this playthrough, I apologize, or this review, I apologize, because that's fucked up, and I wish that upon nobody who plays any video game for an extensive period of time. To lose all your progress is just absolutely absurd. And to just say, "Oh, we're sorry, here's a couple little trinkets," and replay the game again, it doesn't cut it, and that's just not cool. And speaking about that, we're going to move on to now the pros and cons of what I liked and what I disliked about the game, and then wrap this up into why I gave this a 6.5. Okay? So moving to the pros, I did like some of the characters. I did like aspects of the story. I loved the side missions. for the most part because the side missions felt very fleshed out and different. I liked some of the aspects of the freedom in my choices, but ultimately the choices fell flat, and we'll go into that a little bit in the cons. I did like some of the visuals. I think the visuals were definitely a pro. Could the graphics have been better? Yes, of course, but I'm not going to take that away from them. The visuals are still good, and especially the interiors of the certain buildings were really good. Those looked the best. And of course, I liked the sound. The sound design, the music, all that was outstanding. If you're a Star Wars fan and you just want to hear something very Star Wars-esque, just listening to the music alone and just the sound design, they knocked that out of the park. And I got to give them credit where credit is due there. As far as other pros, that's kind of where it falls flat. And that's what leads me into the cons, which unfortunately, I have a lot more cons than I do pros. I felt like there was a lot of technical issues. The game kind of stuttered a few times. I did have a lot of bugs. Like I said, I had a breaking crash that was happening, and yeah, that type of things shouldn't be happening. You can't forgive those types of things, especially if it's going to make you restart a game. That's just a huge loss of points. The gameplay loop I also didn't like. After a while, it becomes very repetitive, very tedious, and you just do the same things over and over. There's a few puzzles, a few like rhythm games, but there's no variation to these two things. It's just a matter of, oh, click this puzzle multiple times. No matter how many times you fail, you can still complete it. So that it kind of took away from the aspect of it being challenging. And then the rhythm games were just a nuisance because it's just one after another. You did it for one door, then you go to a container, you do it again, then you go to this thing, you do it again, and it's just like, why am I sitting here doing this when you could have just had a cool animation of me just pick locking something or opening this crate, and you don't have to waste the time of the player. It just feels like you're wasting my time. But then also at that same fact is if they didn't have this, the game would be even shorter than it already was. So I understand why they did it, but you should have just made the game longer, right? You should have just had a more fleshed out story, a more deeper story that you could have kept going with and developed than just tacking on these little things that just make the game extended for no reason. And similarly, this leads me to my next point. The overall stealth aspect of this game was so bland, so generic. Run up, punch some guy. Run up, punch some guy. Like it's and you're punching people, and it's not even believable because she's punching a stormtrooper in the head with her fist. Like not even using the gun, like it just become the animations just become so laughable, and then the overall aspect of stealth becomes so tedious when you get these can't fail missions. And again, for me it wasn't an issue, but it's still there at the back of your head, like, oh, I don't want to get caught because I have to redo this. And it happened to me just a few times, and that was enough for me to be upset and not want that to happen ever again, right? And so now I'm playing the mission even slower to make sure that I'm not getting caught. It just kind of takes away from the whole aspect of being a smuggler and doing all those things. I would have liked more gunfights, more up close shooting, being able to use the guns, which again is another con. You have secondary guns, but you drop them for everything. No matter what it is, you drop them. You climb something, you drop it. You go into cover, you drop it. You pick up a health item, you drop it. Then what's the point of having these guns in the game if I'm dropping them? It doesn't even make any sense. You're telling me I can't sling it on my back and carry it with me? Like, why are these guns even able to be picked up if I can't use them? You use them for 10 shots and then you drop them. Like, it's just so silly. It makes no sense. I don't know what they were thinking when it came to the gameplay of this. aspect. It's so laughable. And with something like an IP like Star Wars, there's so much they could do, right? Like look at the Jedi games, Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Fallen. I forget what the other one's called. Um, but yeah, those games, both the original and the sequel, were really good. Now, did they have problems at the start? Yes, they did, but they eventually patched them and they fixed those bugs. But those games play really well, right? And they're actually fun to play. It's not boring. It doesn't feel repetitive. It doesn't feel tacked on. And that, mind you, is a still repetitive game, just like every video game. Every single video game has a repetitive loop. It's about making that repetitive loop fun. And that's the problem. They didn't make the repetitive loop fun in Star Wars Outlaws. Instead, it's boring, it's tedious, it feels underwhelming, it feels non-original, and it's so depressing when you're a fan of something like this and you're expecting this game to be really good. We also had something like Star Wars 1313, which is expected to be really good, eventually kicked the can. And it's sad to say that I think this game probably should have kicked the can too. And again, as a gamer, that's upsetting to say. But either this game should have been developed much longer and better, or it should never have been developed. And that's kind of sad because there's aspects of it that are cool and good, and they should have went into those and delved deeper into those and made it better and developed the story better, but they decided not to, and it falls flat. And especially in today's day and age where we're paying $70 for a video game, it is not worth that. It is not worth that at all. So overall, I gotta say, I'm gonna be giving this game a 6.5 out of 10. It's a little bit above average. It is a video game. It's playable. There are some aspects that are fun. There are some aspects that are not fun. Overall, I would say I wouldn't recommend this game to just the average gamer. I wouldn't. If you're a Star Wars fan, I would recommend it to you in a certain sense because you're going to appreciate the little nuances and the little details that they added in the world, right? But if you're not a fan, you're not going to get that stuff, and it's just going to be surface level, and you're not going to really be like excited to see that. But however, the only caveat I have to say is still don't spend $70 on this game. No matter what, if you want to play it, do what I did. Buy the Ubisoft Plus premium subscription. It's $17.99. Purchase it. Take off the auto renewal. Play it for a couple weeks. Beat the game, and be done with it. Do not spend $70. If you want to wait for a sale, that's your prerogative. I don't think it's going to be on sale for less than $18, so I still would recommend for people that want to play this game, just get the subscription, play it that way. That way you don't feel like you're wasting a lot of money. And I can actually say for the 6.5 score that I gave it, it's 100% worth that $18. I got my money's worth out of the $18. I 100% can say that. But if I would have paid $70 for this game, I would have been severely disappointed. And that's what I'm trying to relay to you guys as people watching this. Don't be scammed out of your money. If you were looking forward to play this game or playing this game, just do what I did, get the subscription and play it. And if you don't want to play it and you just want to watch it, I'll put my video playthrough link down below in the description. You can watch it all. I believe it's 7 parts. And you can just watch it and enjoy it for what it is. But that's going to be this review. Again, a 6.5 out of 10. Star Wars Outlaws. Could have done better. Fell flat. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and you made it this far, hit the thumbs up. It really helps out this channel. Really helps the algorithm. And if you're new, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you next time. Peace out. Later.